All right, some baseball talk now. Norman James in London, Ontario. Mike Augello in Cheektowaga, New York. The Jays, Mike, and the Yankees each coming off 3-game sweeps. I think it's going to be a 2-horse race for the AL East down the stretch, don't you think?
Well, I'm not so sure about that. And if it is a two-team race, I don't think the Blue Jays are going to be involved. The Yankees, I think, have surprised many, being able to put up a over 500 record with essentially half of the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders
Yeah, it's
playing.
crazy.
And yeah, but the thing is, it's like, I mean, these are teams going in different directions. I still think, now we've finally seen the debut of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It's a youth movement. It's clearing out older players or players with contracts that will expire in the next year or two for the Blue Jays. And with the Yankees, I mean, they're building around the youngsters, but right now it's just surviving until you can get most of your sluggers back.
What did you think of Vladdy's debut?
Previously to his debut, it was like he was going to hit 3 home runs and 8 RBIs, and I was going to be funny on social media and say, well, 1 for 4 with a double, bust. But he's not. He's not a. It's just, you can't put ridiculous expectations, even if he is the best prospect in the game, too early. I think yes. I mean, because he's a second generation player who was around his dad when he played with the Expos, attuned and more comfortable in a major league locker room than other players. And he's got immense talent. So I think we're going to see good numbers out of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But 1 for 4 in 3 games is not anything to write home
forget
about.
that Vlad Jr. hadn't really played organized baseball up until he signed that contract and began the process from the low professional leagues to where he is now. And every stop along the way, Mike, after he figured the thing out, he commanded and dominated it. Who's to argue that that trend won't continue at the big league level?
Probably will. And the funny thing is that, the comparable to Vlad Jr. in terms of what he has done at the minor league level and what is expected of him at the major league level is not his dad, because you remember his dad he had a history of like pretty free swinging and swinging at bad pitches. Vlad Jr., he gets on base. I think he's going to be more of a slugger than his dad. I mean, I don't know how defensively he'll be at third base. I remember when I talked to him when he was called up to AAA last August, I believe it was July or August in Buffalo, and I asked him who his idol was besides his dad, and he said Adrian Beltre, and he's a third baseman, and Beltre eventually became a Gold Glove third baseman. So I think the influences here, or in terms of what type of player he's going to be. I've heard comparisons to Prince Fielder. I mean, we know his career ended prematurely, but when in his youth, bigger guy, but he got on base and he hit a lot of home runs. And I think that's what you're going to end up seeing out of Vlad Guerrero.
This is the Jenks Pod. Norm James with Mike Augello. Vladdy Jr. is hitting well, but he's no Eric Sogard. We'll leave it at that. What I like about that reclamation project, Mike, is that they bring him in, give him some time to get his game together, which he's doing right now, repackage him, and send him off to a team that could probably use his services better down the stretch. DJ LeMahieu, one of 13 Yankees on the injured list. You've got a team that's right there at the top, second place in the AL East right now, being held together by a bunch of minor leaguers. For someone who has been a Yankee fan forever and loves to see the team dominate, I'm sure, do you find any entertainment value, excitement in watching these young guys do their thing, whether they're going to be future Yankees, future stars? Who cares? They're kind of plugging away and having some fun.
Well, it's more shocking than anything. Like I joked before, I mean, you have players like Theo Estrada, who's more famous for being shot than he is for what he's done on the baseball diamond. Who it was a middle infielder in his minor league career who's been forced into playing left field at the major league level. They trade for Cameron Maybin, who is the definition of a journeyman. I mean, right now. They're just plugging holes and hoping to survive until they start to get some of their players back. And they got Sanchez back last week, and supposedly they're going to get probably Andujar and a couple others Tulowitzki will probably be back this week. But still, I mean, you're without Judge, you're without Gregorius, I've heard both pronunciations.
Yeah.
You're without Andujar, you're without Giancarlo Stanton, and your number one starter, and it hasn't seemed to phase them. And LeMahieu's been one of the key players for them, and I know that he had some knee inflammation. I don't know if he's been placed on the IL or not, but they said he might be able to play in the 2-game series against Arizona this week. So, right now the miracle is that the guys who were supposed to be secondary players for this team have stepped up in big roles, like Brett Gardner and like Luke Voigt and like
Luke Voigt, the AL Player of the Week, not too bad. I mean, it's Vladdy in Toronto, Voigt mania in New York. You love it. What happens to Gio Urshela when Andujar comes back?
I think he may stay, because one of the things that was a concern was defense at third base, and they kept saying that Andujar had improved defensively. But if you have an Urshela who was a defensive replacement mostly with Cleveland, and then I think he had a stint with the Blue Jays last year. He's an excellent defensive third baseman, and if you have him on the 25-man roster as an extra guy, you might be able to have him play third base and free up LeMahieu to play other positions if needs be, because he was supposed to be somebody who would sub in for Andujar every once in a while.
Just for a matter of a fact, DJ LeMahieu is day-to-day with knee inflammation. I don't know if you know anybody who's going to be at Yankee Stadium on May the 4th, the big Star Wars day. It's Jedi CC Sabathia bobblehead day. If anyone gets one, please send it to Canada. I will pay you big time to get it. Do you take any joy in watching Chris Sale struggle? I mean, he was topping out at like 91 miles an hour over the weekend. He's 0-5. The Red Sox, 12-17 or something like that. I figure they'll be back in the mix. But watching a guy like Chris Sale, who's dominated so long, is it wrong to bask in his misery?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't take any pleasure in the failings of others. I reserve that for the National Hockey League. But I honestly, it's like I didn't understand what was behind the Red Sox signing him to, I think it was a 5-year extension at $30 million per. After his numbers and after his velocity had slowed in the playoffs. I mean, you already have one boat anchor of a contract in David Price in your rotation, and now you've added a second. If Sale is not Sale anymore, and he's the shadow of his former self, then that's a dumb contract, and they've signed Xander Bogaerts, and now they're going to sign Mookie Betts. And it must be nice to have no consequence when it comes to money, but they make the Yankees pale in comparison. They're probably going closer to a $300 million payroll, which is
so
obscene.
New York's at Arizona. It's a 9:40 start for us civilized people on the East Coast. I can't stand when my favorite team is out west, whether it's the Jays, the Leafs, the Raptors, who kind of blew it against the 76ers last night on a basketball note. And then you have the Jays in to see the Anaheim Angels, the LA Angels. We'll see what happens. 14-14. They could come back 14-20 or 14-22. You're waiting for the bubble to burst. Then again, who knows how long it's going to take. I think it was 2012 when Adam Lynn was on a tear and the team got off to a 27-14 start. And I don't know if the expectations were that great, but 27-14, 13 games over 500, and I don't even think they won 80 games that season. It's funny how baseball can go sometimes.
Yeah, and that Jays team that went to the ALCS and almost won. They were 500 when they made the trades for Tulowitzki.
Yeah.
And David Price. So, I mean, and then they just were unbelievable in the second half. I honestly, I think that, and I think that Blue Jays fans can take enjoyment from this team and watching what Vlad Jr. does, and see what the future may hold. But Buster Olney today on TSN Radio made the point that things are playing out the right way for the Blue Jays in terms of what can happen before July 31st. And he pointed to the fact that guys like Madison Bumgarner and other potential free agent pitchers are not having big years, and Stroman and Sanchez are pitching well at this point. And, it's sort of what the Blue Jays did in reverse a few years ago when they traded, Syndergaard and a package of prospects to get R.A. Dickey. They're in the same position, but in terms of getting 3 or 4 players and a top pitching prospect in deals for Stroman or for Sanchez, because simply they're not going to be here when it's time to contend. When Guerrero and Biggio and Bichette and all those young players are there, they're not going to be there. They're going to be someplace else because they're going to go via free agency. But if you trade them before July 31st, there is the value there of replenishing. And if you look, all the prospects in this organization, or most of them, are hitters. They need
no question.
Young
Aaron Sanchez, he's the kind of guy, if he's healthy, Mike, and he's on his game, he's right up there with, he could contend for a Cy Young. Was it 3 years ago, he won the ERA title in the American League. Nate Pearson's, I don't know how far Nate Pearson's going to be in terms of where he is now and when he can arrive in the major leagues and do something of substance. He's the 3rd ranked prospect in the Jays organization, 72nd in baseball among the top 100. So he has plenty of upside according to baseball scouts and those in the know, but you can't pin the hopes and dreams of the team's pitching staff on one guy. You need a collective. Last thing for you, Brandon Drury. What do you make of this guy? I don't know what his backstory is with the Yankees or what he was pegged to do, but he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, okay? And he was struggling. He was frustrated with it. He was working with Louis Rivera, the Jays' third base coach, how to not be so hard on himself and not clench the bat too tight. He hits that home run Friday night, the walk-off. Then he hits, a home run in the extra innings the other night. What do you make of a guy like that who goes from 0 to 100 and could go back to 0? Is it just baseball? Is it a psychological? Do you know anything about this guy that tells you, he's basically an up and down kind of player?
Well, I know that the Yankees brought him in last year because they didn't believe Andujar was going to be ready to play in the majors, and he was supposed to be their third baseman. I know that he had I'm pretty sure it was vision problems based on migraines that he sort of hid from the Yankees, and he went on the injured list, and they brought up Andujar, and Andujar started hitting, and he was too good to take out of the lineup. So then he was included in the J. Happ deal. And now apparently he got the vision problems and the migraine problems straightened out. And he's relatively young, but the Yankees looked at him last year as somebody who would legitimately be their third baseman. They were relatively high in him, and it just didn't work out. But now with Guerrero there, if they don't want to put him in every day at third base, he could spell him. I know he has the capability of playing other infield positions. So, it might be somebody, if again, along the lines of Stroman and Sanchez and maybe Justin Smoke. This is a guy, if you play and he plays well, that you might be able to flip him and get something really good.
What a crazy game baseball is. You have nothing. You can't do anything. You feel terrible. One hit in a big situation, a walk-off shot, and you're thinking to yourself, I can do this. And they haven't been able to get him out since. Michael, enjoy the Yankees out west or wherever they are, kind of out west, and I'll do the same with the Blue Jays. Take care, buddy.